Hi folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for listening to Fat Burning Man, where we talk about real food and real results. We're here this week with Dr. Amy Myers to talk about autoimmunity, the thyroid, and how to reduce environmental toxins to nip disease in the bud. Before we get to the show, I wanted to let you know that we just released the Wild Diet Cooking Class, a 16-part cooking series that shows you how to cook quick and easy meals for you and your family in 15 minutes or less. Allison and I set up GoPros and cameras in the kitchen to show you exactly how we cook at home, and I hope you like it. We cook delicious things like cheesecake, avocado stuffed burgers, and it's making me salivate right now just kind of thinking about it. But we really did put a lot of work into this, and I hope that you enjoy it. So if you'd like to check it out, please visit fatburningman.com and look for the Wild Diet Cooking Class with me and my wife, Allison, and a few little cameos from the dog too. In the meantime, here's the review of the week. Pivotal. This is from Wolf Fang Fists. I always get a kick out of reading people's names on iTunes. It's the best. I'm a 19-year-old active duty service member. I'm currently on a team of bodybuilding type competitors. The episode with Chaz Branham, which is about when I started listening, really changed the way I viewed things. From your podcast, The Tim Ferriss Show, and The Model Health Show, I've come to realize how pivotal your topics and conversations are. It's absolutely fantastic, and I'm hooked. I appreciate all the knowledge and information you've shared. I look forward to reading The Wild Diet and trying out the ketosis diet for myself. Well, thank you so much, Wolf Fang Fists. It's so cool. I love to hear that, people who are younger, you're only 19 listening to this show. This is just so freaking fantastic. But I always love hearing from you guys. So if you want to share your story, best way to do that is sign up at fatburningman.com. Just hit reply on the email. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know what you think of the show. You can also always leave a review on iTunes. I read every one of them, and I really appreciate it. Okay, so on to the show with the doc. Amy Myers, MD, is a leader in functional medicine and New York Times bestselling author of The Autoimmune Solution. She received her doctorate in medicine from LSU Health Sciences Center and spent 5 years working in emergency medicine before training with the Institute of Functional Medicine. On this show, you'll learn why CrossFit doesn't work for everyone, what to do if you suspect you have a thyroid issue, how to reduce environmental toxins to nip disease in the bud, and how to exercise when you are extremely low on time. All right, let's go hang out with the doc. All right, folks, I'm very excited to be here today with Amy Myers, MD, who's a leader in functional medicine and New York Times bestselling author of The Autoimmune Solution. How's it going, Dr. Myers?
Awesome. So
Good.
Happy to be here.
So in typical MD fashion, you you raced across town to do this interview at home, and it's been a really long day, but I just want to thank you once again for coming here because, as I was saying before this call, what you do as a doctor in functional medicine, kind of outside the traditional system, is so important and it's so needed, and I can only imagine how little time you have for stuff like this. So it's really in great service to the people who are listening, because one of the biggest questions that I get is, how do I find an awesome doctor? And I'm like, I don't know, we're working on it, but we appreciate that you are one.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I usually do these on Thursdays and Fridays and, in a relaxed state, and our schedules were so difficult to match that I raced after a day of clinic, and then you're like, can we do video? I'm like, got no idea what I look like, but sure. So,
well, the good news
for a long day at work.
Yeah. Well, the good news, most people listen by audio anyway, so we're ready to rock. But you also look great too. So I think that this is good. So if you let's see, why don't we get started actually with your own personal experience? We could talk a little bit more, especially about how that flipped on its head as a practitioner as well. But you actually encountered some very intense struggles at the beginning in the traditional system with autoimmunity. So why don't you just share a little bit about your personal experience?
Yeah, and so in my book, The Autoimmune Solution is the first chapter, so I don't want to spoil the whole thing. I'll give a little synopsis, plus we might be here for the whole 40 minutes, just me telling my story. So you can read it in the book, but the kind of bottom line is that I got Graves' disease my second year of medical school, which is an autoimmune disease of the thyroid. My thyroid was overactive, so I was having panic attacks and muscle weakness and tremors and was losing weight. and insomnia, and eventually went to the doctor. And, she kind of brushed it off as medical school stress and told me I was just, thinking I had every disease I was learning about. And I was pretty irritated by that because I had been through some pretty, intense stuff. I'd been a Peace Corps volunteer. My mother had passed away from cancer, and I'd never responded to anything this way. So I didn't think it was just stress. And I asked for a full workup and then got a call back. And she told me that, in fact, I had a problem with my thyroid and it was autoimmune in nature. And anybody who knows about that knows the conventional options really are not great. There's medicine to suppress your thyroid. There's pulling your thyroid out, i.e. surgery. And then there's blowing it up like Hiroshima with iodine 131.
Right.
And none of those sounded appropriate to me. I actually went into medicine thinking I would do exactly what I'm doing, but I didn't know how to get there. So I had this, holistic view. I was president of the Complementary and Alternative Interest Group in medical school. Again, my whole background and sort of upbringing is in the book, and why this just kind of, even though I was in medical school, really didn't sit well with me.
Sure.
And so ultimately I tried some alternative stuff. It didn't work. And so I ended up doing the conventional thing of medicine, ended up with toxic hepatitis, and my liver was literally failing. Wow. And I thought I was going to have to drop out of med school. Ultimately had my thyroid ablated, so I don't have a thyroid anymore. And so, then after that happened and sort of getting settled on thyroid medicine, I mean, it was really a roller coaster for many years. And until I found functional medicine, frankly, and figured out, kind of the root cause of why I even got in this boat. And, food sensitivities, gut problems, heavy metals. I mean, you name it, I kind of had it. And that's how I really came up with the program that I use in my clinic and that I write about in my book.
Yeah. And so for people who aren't that familiar with issues of the thyroid. I know my mom is hypothyroid and has been for some time, but before she even realized that, there were a lot of things going wrong. She didn't know what the problem was. You kind of have the opposite side of things, which presents very differently in terms of symptoms. How would people know if they have an issue that's thyroid related, at least?
Well, it can be difficult, and I actually have a great blog on my website that people can print out and take to their doctors, because there are people who have obvious symptoms, such as in the case of, and I have a lot of different, articles on the thyroid, but I have one in particular that even gives lab ranges, and I'll get into that in a second. But, the thyroid is like your engine. And so it's, when it's low, things slow down. So that can be cold, gaining weight, constipation, hair falling out, brain fog, depression. And then for me, everything was speeding up, and I'm already kind of a type A,
Sure.
high energy personality. And then imagine that, on 10 cups of coffee, and it was really bad. Fast heart rate, panic attacks, insomnia, not sleeping. So everything speeds up with hyperthyroidism. That's where I was getting the panic attacks and the weight loss and nervousness and insomnia and all that stuff. So you can go to your doctors like I did, but even mine wanted to brush it off, right? And I'm a pretty persistent person. And then being in medical school, they treat you differently. And then now being a doctor, when you go to a doctor, they treat you differently. So I understand that, both from a knowledge point of view, as well as just being treated differently, that I can often be more persistent than, say, someone who isn't, a doctor or a medical student when they go to the doctor. So somebody else might have just been brushed off. I mean, I insisted that I have a workup. And that's kind of a lot of what I talk about in the book, is really being your own advocate and giving you the tools. And that's really, one of my biggest mottos is educating and empowering people. So whether they choose to do this or not, they have tools, to help them. But then when you get there, you may have all of these symptoms, and the doctor checks your TSH, which is one of the main levels that they check for the thyroid. And if you're lucky, they'll check a free T4. But what most doctors don't check is a free T3. Now, some are getting on board with that, but then they don't, if they check a free T3, then they don't check a reverse T3.
Yeah.
And then most doctors aren't even checking thyroid antibodies. So there's a whole lot of places that things can still go wrong with the thyroid. And I'm not going to get into the details of what all that does unless you want me to.
Sure.
And, I have a lot of blogs on my website about this, as well as that article you can print out about these are the labs you should check. These are the ranges. And then, being in normal range is very different than being in optimal range. So even if you get a doctor that's sort of willing to check these things, but it's not something they're used to doing, but they're willing to do it because you've brought in this article, still didn't mean that you could have a free T3, say at 2.5, which is normal range, but it's very low. I like it above 3, 3.2. So optimal and normal are different things. So it can be very difficult, which is why Thyroid is likely my next book, because it can be very difficult that people have all these symptoms, or even going and getting their thyroid checked, and yet they're being told nothing's wrong. And so a whole host of that is that the reference ranges, you could be normal but not optimal. Many people believe the reference range is too broad, and then doctors aren't often checking the right labs.
Yeah. So it gets tricky. If you wind up with some sort of more advanced stage of disease or dysfunction, let's talk about the other side of that, preventative medicine. So what are the things that you think people should be doing to kind of prevent walking into a doctor's office? Certainly the type of doctor who's not going to give you the advice that you might give someone else.
Yeah. So, I mean, my book, The Autoimmune Solution, I talk about this spectrum. And at the one end of the spectrum, at the very end is autoimmunity. And at the other end is, no problem. And then somewhere in between is this small amounts of inflammation that are kind of gradually building over time. And there are very few people walking around, with the diet that we're eating and the toxic environment that we're living in that, don't have some level of inflammation. I mean, maybe the Dalai Lama, doesn't have any because he's meditated it all away. But other than that, the vast majority of us, live in the real world, and there's some amount there. And so really trying to get as far down on that spectrum as you can. And so I think, with the book, whether it's somebody who has full-blown autoimmunity, some, inflammatory condition like asthma or eczema or irritable bowel, to even just acne could benefit from it, even to somebody could use it as a preventative way, in terms of somebody who doesn't perceive that they have a problem and just want to use it for prevention. And that's, I talk about 4 pillars in the book, and it's really kind of 5 factors. I group infections and toxins or infections and stress into one pillar, but it's really 4 pillars that I talk about. And that's, I'm sure many people have been on, you just wrote a book about the diet, so there's the dietary component of it all. There's the gut component of it all, with all the leaky gut that, infections that people are walking around in. But then there's, 3 other areas that I don't think a lot of people are talking about a lot yet, which is the environmental factors of all the toxins in the air and water and, all around us. And then there's infections that are known to be implicated in various chronic diseases, some of which we can prevent, other of which we can actually get rid of by treating truly with antibiotics. And then there's the stressful life that, really most people are not really talking about, right? We're discussing, you're on your book tour right now, traveling all around, I'm in clinic and racing here to do a podcast. And, we're just working and living in this area where, the cell phone is going off, you're on the computer, the this, the that, the other. We're trying to accomplish all this stuff, particularly those of us in the health field of, helping a lot of people. So many of us are working long hours trying to, to do that. So those are, the sort of 4 main pillars or 5 factors that I think anybody can address in their life to prevent illness. And I mean, that's the book. It's, to prevent and reverse autoimmunity. So to prevent illness as well as to reverse illness.
So let's start with what you mentioned that doesn't necessarily get talked about that much, the environmental toxins. What are some of the things that people these days, modern day humans, are up against that our bodies might not be well adapted to handle?
Yeah, so I mean, there are 80,000 chemicals in the environment, most of which have not been tested, or if they have been tested, it's very quickly, and it's usually in isolation. They're not testing. Let's say that you have a bottle of Windex, and I don't know anything about Windex, but let's just say it has 5 ingredients. They've tested those 5 ingredients separately, not 5 ingredients together, and then nobody's using just the Windex. It's the same thing with body products. They say, oh, the parabens and the phthalates, they're not a problem. They're in such small dosage. Well, but by the time somebody leaves their house, they've already used 10 body products, and then they're going to go home and use more, and they're out in the environment. So, I mean, what I talk about in the book is mostly I give people information so that they believe that there's a problem and that they should do something about it. And then I really give solutions. I mean, that's the point. I mean, that's what people want to read is, okay, now what? Don't bog me down and freak me out. Just give me enough and then tell me what to do about it. So, I mean, how do toxins or anything get into our body? We breathe them in, we eat them or drink them in, and they can get in through our skin. So I really have people kind of, looking at those areas. What can you do to either prevent things from coming in? And then if they get in, what can you do to detox them?
Yeah.
So preventing is, what do we eat and drink? So water. What do we put on our body? People don't think about getting a shower filter. I mean, I have shower filters in all my showers. If you can get a whole house filter, awesome.
Let me just ask you why, because I don't think I've talked about that on the show, but we do have one. And I think a lot of people don't really realize what's coming out of the tap. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you just think about our skin is our biggest organ and you're sitting there, you're in the shower and there's actually, I give this example in my book. Kathleen, I can't think of her last name. She's a researcher out of the University of Arkansas, and she was the first person to really show that it's these chronic low-level exposures to toxins that really alter the immune system. Like one big exposure, it's the same thing with stress. One big stressor, not going to kill you, but this chronic day in and day out stressors are what drag down those adrenals and cause immune issues. Same thing, these stressors. So she did radio tagged immune cells for something called TCE, which is a common environmental toxin that is found in dry cleaning. So people who work in dry cleaning areas have much higher. But I mean, anything from chlorine to fluoride to heavy metals to prescription drugs to, TCEs are in our water.
Yeah.
And when you take a shower, the TCEs are in warm water, they become a vapor. So you breathe them in and you're absorbing them through your skin. And so often, taking a hot shower is one of the worst things you can do because you're getting it in two ways. You're breathing in things that have become volatile compounds and you're also absorbing it through your skin, right? I mean, our skin is our biggest organ. I mean, there are all kinds of hormone creams and other medications that are creams. You absorb all of that. So, most people think about the water filter to drink, but they're not really thinking about the shower. Or I love a hot bath at night with Epsom salt, right? Opening up all your pores, sitting there in the hot tub, soaking for 30 minutes at a time, reading a book, and then, what have you absorbed? So they're very inexpensive. In fact, if people go to my website, on my store, if you go under more, the company that I use, Aquasana, if you put in Dr. Myers, they'll get 40% off any water filter that they own, that they order. If you can do a whole house filter, that's awesome. But if you can't, most people can't. They live in an apartment. It's an expense that they can't afford. I mean, we were in a new home and it was built before we bought it. And so we would have to break through literally the foundation of the house to add it. And so, we weren't going to do that. So we just have them. And where do we get these things? Again, through the skin. So looking at body products that we're putting on. I wrote a blog recently where I just literally what is my morning and what is my night routine? And I don't get anything out of promoting these people. It's the makeup I use and the lotion I use is what I use. Skin is, thinking water, thinking body products. Of course, I mean, we can get into things like mycotoxins and things like that can get in through your skin, but let's just deal with the things that the average person is dealing with. And so that's eating organic, drinking filtered water, showering with filtered water, making sure your body products are clean, and then the air you breathe. And so the studies are that the home environment, because of all the off-gassing of products that we're using and how tightly closed homes are, they can be 5 to 100 times more toxic than the outdoor air. So HEPA filters. Then, trying to get it out of your system. Glutathione. I'm a huge fan of glutathione. You can see my infrared sauna right behind me. So, really, making sure you're peeing, pooping, sweating every day and getting this stuff out of your system.
Yeah. That's no problem in Austin, the sweating part, at least.
Yeah, I know. I'm already sort of doing it while we're talking. I'm like, I don't think the AC, I didn't get to turn that down when I ran in the door either. But, yeah, I mean, these are simple fixes. Buying a sauna might not be something everybody can do, but a water filter, trying to buy cleaner products. I mean, Dr. Bronner's inexpensive, very clean soap. I mean, there are a lot of products. There are a lot of websites out there. Do it yourself. Make your own deodorant. Make your own this. Make your own that. I make my own toothpaste. I put a blog on that. So it's becoming easier and easier as people are waking up to all these toxins about, websites and things available to you to help, fray the cost, of it's not as expensive as it used to be. Let me just put it that way to live cleanly.
And it's ways to live cleanly are popping up all over the place now. Like there are a lot more places where you can get clean food and clean
Absolutely.
products that aren't full of toxic poisons. Right. I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say or even think about, but when you look at, if we reached a trough, it was probably in the past 10, 20 years, kind of when I was coming of age, when the food was toxic, the environment was growing worse and worse. And at least people are starting to realize that now. And it's promising, I think, that so many people are starting to talk about it and realize that, we've got to do something about this. And it all starts with your daily habits. So let me ask you this. You mentioned stress as well. And you obviously are confronted with an ungodly amount of complications and challenges in running your practice and writing books and doing all the things that you do. Maybe this is just a selfish question for me. How do you manage stress? When you're up against all those different things, what are the little things that you do?
Sometimes it's hard. I mean, it's definitely my weak link and something that doing all the other stuff, I'm not always as perfect about it, so to speak. But I think in the times when things are more stressful than usual, then it's when I'm really making sure that I'm eating clean and I'm exercising and I'm sleeping and I'm doing all the things. I think one of the biggest things is when people get stressed, it's when they're like, oh, I don't care, I'm going to eat the pizza. I don't care. Right. I can live on 4 hours of sleep. I don't care. I'm going to sit on the sofa. And so I always tell people those are the times that you're really got to be hitting it hard with making sure you're getting your sleep. You're, you are eating really clean and taking care of yourself. So this year I'm really making an effort in terms of, just hiring more people. So when there's, a problem that I'm not the one having to deal with it. I just hired my husband actually as my
firefighter.
CFO. Yeah. So, I mean, that's really because I realize that what I've been doing isn't self-sustaining and that, if I want to reach more people, then I need to have those systems in place. Heart math, I'm not always that great at it, but I really do try to do heart math. There's an app that I have on my, on my phone and a little heart math. I mean, just when I wrote my book, obviously I have a chapter on that. And in Harper One, my publisher had said, well, we want your routine. And I said, well, I mean, I'm not giving you my routine because if they're like me, they're going to get stressed out that they didn't do it right. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, my husband plays golf and that's his meditation.
Sure.
So I like to go walk the dog or take a hot bath or get in the sauna. And so what I do might resonate with somebody, but it might not. And so I didn't want people to get stressed that they weren't doing the thing that I asked them to do in the book. They're like, we need your 5-minute, routine and 5 steps to this. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that because there'll be somebody like me who's trying to follow everything to a T and doing what I asked them to do caused them more stress. So we give in the book, I give you kind of a list of things that have been known to help, with stress. Acupuncture, I love acupuncture. Yeah. I mean, I can go to yoga, I'm still doing the list. I can try to meditate, I'm still doing the list. I go to acupuncture and I'm like a horse that has been, hit with a
tranquilizer.
Tranquilizer dart. I'm just like, so that for me, and when I see patients like me, very, type A and, high energy, I recommend acupuncture for people.
Yeah. If there were one thing, I'm sure a lot of people would want, who are listening to this right now, would want to walk into your office. But is there anything that's especially kind of like under the radar today that, if they can't walk into the office, you could kind of offer that as general information? Like you might be struggling with this problem that most people don't know about.
Well, this is what I would say is that it's honestly in my book. Like if you cannot come see me, which most people can't, I mean, just, logistically and all that kind of stuff. And we're kind of booked out as I'm looking for another doctor. But the book is really it. I mean, it is exactly what I do with the patient. And, I walk you through the steps. I see yeast and SIBO and so many people. I give you quizzes to take. I give you supplements, and herbs to do. This is as close as it can be to seeing me. Now, what I will say is if somebody has done the program and they, it's a 30-day program, everybody's, some people will be great in 30 days. Other people might need 3 months. Other people might still need to see a functional medicine practitioner, but it's all there. And so what I would say is when people have done that and they are still not better, I give you some other things to think about. That would be Lyme, that would be toxic molds. And, I have resources about this stuff on my website. And those are the things, when people, this is the triage that I would say, because, I've seen it evolve. We're both in the paleo community, right? So when I started kind of speaking there, I was getting all these people who had done the diet, but then they hadn't fixed their gut. And now, like, all the books are out there with the gut, and now people are coming in and they've fixed their gut. So I've done the diet, I've fixed the gut. So, like, what's still my problem? And so what's still your problem? I mean, if you're seeing a conventional doctor, depends on the issue, but things I would be looking at is, are they really looking at your thyroid in the full way that we've discussed? Because that can be huge. I would wonder about, adrenals, and has the stress in your life been addressed? And then I would be thinking about more outside the box stuff. And that I would call, and you need to see a functional physician for this, heavy metals, mercury toxicity. I would think about mycotoxins or toxic molds, or I would be thinking about Lyme disease.
Okay. Now, what about candida? You brought up yeast a bit, and that's obviously something that you don't want to struggle with, but what does that look like, and what do you have to do to deal with it?
So that can look like a lot of different things. That's one of the things that if you Google this, so websites will come up, and for one person, it's brain fog. For somebody else, it's depression. For somebody else, it's irritable bowel. For somebody else, it's joint pain. So it's one of these masqueraders that can kind of do anything. But when I hear brain fog, I mean, that's really a big trigger for me. I mean, as well as the history. So one of the things I do in my book is really walk people through rather than just giving an example. I give the example and I say clue number 1, clue number 2. So were you a C-section? Were you bottle fed? Did you have ear infections and and so you can see in these stories that I'm telling of real patients how they got their yeast or candida. And it's very prevalent. I mean, a huge number of my patients have it. And, I have a self-selecting group, right? I'm not going to tell you everybody has yeast overgrowth, although a large number of people do that are on the standard Western diet, right? Highly processed. They've been taking antibiotics. They're on acid blocking medication. Many, many people do. But certainly a huge number of people in my clinic do, but they're self-selecting. It's people who are here with chronic, illnesses. And that's one of the, I don't want to say failures of the paleo protocol, but one that I see frequently is here, eat all this fermented food. And people are coming in off of these Western diets where they have, guts full of candida and small bowel bacterial overgrowth, and they're eating all this fermented food. And I seem to differ than a lot of people out there, but this is just what I see clinically. Those fermented foods are really good to build the good bacteria, but they also feed bad bacteria and they also feed yeast. So I don't recommend those fermented foods until people have really killed off the yeast by, way of starving them, taking some herbal supplements, caprylic acid, Candesol, or if you see a practitioner, actually a true antifungal, prescription antifungal. And then after you've really gotten rid of that, you can add in those fermented foods to restore and rebuild the good bacteria.
Well, now, in terms of your routine, because we're coming up on time now, one of the questions that we get a lot is, how do you exercise as a busy woman? So I figured you would be a pretty good person to ask. How do you fit it in? What do you do? What does it look like?
Yeah, so it kind of, it depends. I go through periods where it's not a CrossFit, but it's like a high intensity kind of, deadlifts, kettlebell swings, that type of workout. That's, sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes longer, or just simply walking the dog. I mean, it really just depends on, how stressful the day was and can I handle that or not. So recently going through some stress, so the dog's been getting walked a lot. So, 2-mile loop around the neighborhood. And that's, she's happy about that.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it really, I mean, I've gone through periods of yoga. I've gotten out of that habit, but, also been thinking maybe I should get back in that habit. But in general, it's kind of the intensity type training, but not a CrossFit. I mean, I see, again, just looking at, pitfalls, and there are plenty of people who do well with that, but I see the people who are sick, and usually the people I'm seeing, that is not a good workout for them. Their adrenals are already burned out, their thyroid's burned out, and that is very high intensity and stressful for their body.
Yeah, so a lot of people might not realize that, but you're not always best suited to do super intense exercises right from the get-go. What do you recommend to people who are a little bit more burned out?
Do nothing. I mean, No, I mean, I'm serious. It's like I'm the person, like I'm seeing the marathon runner who is 29 and she's already burned out her adrenals and isn't having periods or, whatever. So a lot of times I'm telling these people like, what exercise should do is energize you. And if you're spent or exhausted or on the sofa the next day, that is not for you. So it's really, I've actually never gone to CrossFit, so I don't know the whole, but I hear about it. It's competitive, right? And so people that are doing that, they have that and they don't want to fail or let somebody down or let themselves down. And so they really honestly need a doctor to say, that is not good. Like I need your prescription is to go to yoga. Your prescription is to go on a walk, not run 10 miles. And really at the end of the day, exercise should be there to energize us, release stress, and and set us right. And if you're feeling worse, you're anxious, you're joint pain, you're in pain, you can't get off the sofa, you're too spent to do that. And you really need to back off to the place where you again feel energized. And if that's walking across the street, that's what it is. If it's running 1 mile, that's what that is. It's like all of this, it's personalized, and there are some generalizations that we can make, but at the end of the day, everybody's an individual. And so whether that's a toxin, a food, or an exercise, you got to see what works for yourself.
Sure. Cool. Well, thank you. That's great advice. We're just about out of time. Before we go, why don't you tell folks where they can find you and a little bit more about your book?
Yeah. So everything that social media, my website are all amymyersmd.com. So that's AMYMYERSMD.com. The book looks like this and can be found at pretty much any bookstore and certainly on Amazon or any of the, Barnes and Noble and that kind of stuff.
Right on. Well, Dr. Amy Myers, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking some time from your busy schedule, and we wish you the best of luck.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Good luck on your book tour as well.
Thank you. Hey, this is Abel James from Fat Burning Man, and if you liked this video today, please take a quick second to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Now, I have a quick question for you. Do you want to learn how to get fit and lose fat by exercising less? Get the step-by-step strategies for how to do that right now for free. All you have to do is subscribe to this channel right now, then click the link below to fatburningman.com. Enter your best email to sign up for my newsletter, and I'll send you a quick start guide to burning fat right now and some ridiculously good recipes as a special thanks. Once again, just go to fatburningman.com right now and enter your best email to get your free fat burning download straight to your inbox. Talk to you soon. But this keeps it nice.
There's
and
another
warm,
product,
and it's about the same price as those glass ones. But I broke enough of those
why so many
to
of
go
the
for this
low
one.
carb
It's lasted a long time.
are holding on to how they want. I felt this when I lost my first 50 pounds.